With that said, I want to welcome you all this afternoon. This will be a good webinar for everyone. My name's Stan Henney. I'm the Business Development Manager here at CAD-1, but more importantly this afternoon I have in the pilot seat I have Barbara Thompson, AIA, one of our resident architects and Revit instructors, and we also have as co-host today or co-pilot today Brian D. Juge, not to be confused with Brian W. Juge, who will be helping us with this presentation today. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Barbara. Do we have a slide, kind of the standard webinar slide here?
Yes, we do.
How to do that? Most of you have been on webinars plenty before, but every once in a while we get somebody who doesn't know how this gig works here. So if you want to minimize the console, hit the orange and white arrow and that'll get the console out of the way so you can see the whole screen. This one always, I think, is funny because you won't hear me if you're not on the right speaker or mic system, but there's the telephone and mic and speakers button and you have to choose accordingly. There's the access call. Can everybody, let's see, raise your hand and let us know if you are hearing us. I think you probably all are, but just to make sure. We got a new microphone and it's pretty cool, but we want to make sure everybody can hear us here. Looks like there's a fair number of you, so that's good. And most importantly, if you want to ask questions, please type them into the question box. And we have Barbara doing one of her first webinars today, so we may hold the questions more toward the end. As she gets more used to the system, we'll do them in context in the future. But for right now, let's hold those to the end, but feel free to ask them and queue them up. So with that, do you have any polls left, or are we ready to go? Okay, good. Everything's in order here, and so let's go ahead and move to the next slide and go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, we are looking at setting up some basic templates in Revit. So if you created some templates, hopefully we'll have a few other tips for you possibly. Won't probably get into a lot of advanced stuff, but if you do have questions about other things that we haven't brought up, then please send your questions in and we'll get to as many of those at the end as possible. So some of the concepts that we're looking at here, first of all, why are we using templates? And a template will do a lot for you when you're working with Revit. So whenever you're creating template, or when you're creating new project files, new family files, Revit's already using a template to create those files. And so by customizing those, you can save yourself a lot of time in the preliminary stages of your projects. You don't have to continually repeat the same processes that you've done in the past. So we can start off with a lot of your content already within your template, and you're able to then just start working on the project. So we'll look through building the basic template, what's going to go in the templates, and then also how to use them efficiently so that you're not constantly searching for the templates.
I think a good thing to start out with is, what this isn't designed for, who's the target audience. And if you guys have been working on templates for a long time and for a lot of years, this isn't necessarily, I'd say the webinar for you. We can get into more customization and higher end stuff. But I think really when Barbara was putting this together, it was covering the basics and stuff. So for those of you that really haven't done it before, have done very little, or it's always been done for you in your project. So I think it's good to specify who is this intended for.
Right, and so as we look at templates and why you would want to set up your own templates, look at a couple of things then. For one thing, maintaining standards so that working in an office environment We don't all start bringing in our own personal preferences as far as tags go, any types of text, what the views look like. So it's a good way to standardize things so that when the project is sent out, then everyone is at least got the same format and it looks like a cohesive project. So some of those things will include the naming convention so that everyone's using the same type of naming for view names, sheet names, and other types of saving conventions as well. So where do you store the files? Where are you bringing that stuff from? We'll have a uniform title block that'll be used, so you'll bring in your company title block, and that'll be present in all of the projects, and no need to load it again later. And then some other things, line weights and types, most of the typical objects that you use in your projects. So we can use those from other projects, bring them into the template, and then everything's available each time you start Revit. Another big use for templates, or a big reason to customize them, is to increase your efficiency. So this is going to save you a lot of time in starting projects because you won't have to go back and set up each project again from scratch. You won't have to go back and load all of the families that you're always using. And even though this is going to take some time in the beginning to set a new template up, if you think about all the time you're going to save every time you start a project and you don't have to redo all of those things, then it's worth your time at the front end here to set up a good template. So standards. So why do we have standards? And so if everybody has their own standards, we really don't have standards, right? But you may have someone in the office that's like this, right? Everybody says, oh, I like my standards, so we'll use those. And normally if you've developed a set of standards, or maybe this is time to sit down and talk about what kind of standards your office wants to have, or even if you're a sole proprietor, or if you're working on your own and you want to just set up standards so that every time you do a project it doesn't look different when you send them out. So what are we going to put in the templates? Mostly what's going to go in there are things that are used for all of your projects. So your title block's not going to change from one project to the next. And mostly you're not going to be customizing all of your text types and all of your other annotation objects. We build a lot of these things once, and then they will always be available. Now, you may not need them for every project, but it's easier to purge them out than it is to go back and create those for each new project, or even to just reload them for each project. So views, those of you who've been using Revit for a while know when you first start from any of the templates, the basic out-of-the-box templates, they start with 2 levels. And so that's very limiting as far as what kind of projects you do, and then one of the first steps you usually have to take is to set up those levels. So if you do that in your template, then they're already there, they're available. Maybe you don't use a 10-foot floor-to-floor height, so you can adjust that and then label those appropriately. Then we're also going to create the standard views that you normally use. So most people, if you're doing a typical type of project, if you do mostly residential projects, you'll have a certain set of views that you typically are including. And the same thing for commercial, for other types of projects, that most of these things don't change a great deal from each project. And so having those included in your templates then gives you that kind of head start on getting everything set up. We're also going to look at creating what's called a starting view. So when you bring up a project, you start always on the same page. This is really useful when you are collaborating especially. So if multiple people are using this project and you're doing work sharing, then everyone sees the same page every day. So project notes go there, notes to the team members, so that you can keep the communication open and point out things that they need to pay attention to in the project. View templates are also a big time saver. So every view that you create in Revit, then you've set up all of the visibility settings, you set up, go through your visibility graphics and go and change things for each view. But you can divide those up by the type of view and then just simply apply that rather than manually going through each view and resetting those. A lot of these items we can use the transfer project standards if you see the little icon up there. So this is a great tool when you've been working for a while in different projects, then use that information, bring it into your template. Don't recreate things when they've already been done. You can use this for many of the different object types in there, wall types and text types and a lot of different elements. I don't know, you think of anything else, Brian, goes in there?
All the view templates, yeah, they're definitely used for all kinds of your different views. You can set them up so you can do life safety plans, so 1-hour walls, 2-hour walls, those types of things that you might have as a standard project. Electrical plans, plumbing plans, so everything that you have set up in there, we can have the view templates put in there for. In addition to that, and I think Barbara will get into this a little bit later, we also have something that's new in the last couple of years, and that's your temporary view templates that you can go and use. So if I like my view a certain way, if I want to go in and always turn off annotation to go mark things up, I can use what is called a temporary view template, and that'll allow me to turn off certain things but not be the print setting in there. So I'm not going into the visibility graphics and turning off the annotation permanently. I'm going in and using what's called a temporary view template to help set that up, and that's been a nice thing to have that we had for the past 2 or 3 years, I believe, 2 years. Not a lot of people are aware of it, so that's a great thing to have in there.
Yeah, so we'll definitely take a look at that when we get into creating our view templates. So just briefly, a few of the other things that we would typically include in there. Schedules. So your schedules will typically have the same types of information in those. So you could put all of your headings in there for the schedules, door schedules, finished schedules, room schedules. And this can include, your working schedules and also the printed schedules that go on sheets. Same thing with legends. So if you use some typical legends for your projects, we developed those, then we'll bring those in. And you can have all of this information available and sort of pick and choose from what's in the template and rearrange things as appropriate for the new projects. Then we'll get into putting all this on sheets. So the sheet is your final product. This is what's going to be sent to print, and this is what you're sending out for your client reviews, for your bids, and for everyone else who sees your project. And so these will be the uniform sheets that we set up. We'll even create the views and the viewports that go onto the sheets. And then included in some of those will be notes. If you use a standard set of notes, that your general notes that go on every project, you want to make sure that those are consistent. And so by placing those in the template, then they will be the same ones each time. And then as, I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, but it's important to keep your templates updated. So as things change, make sure you do at least every couple of years, every 2 years, do a thorough review of the template to see that you're still up to date and that you haven't actually made changes on things.
With that, we want to just ask you guys a poll question out there, so now you should have on your screen. When was the last time you updated your Revit template? So you guys start chiming in on that, or let's just get an idea of who's out there, who's done what when. We'll close that in a couple seconds here. So,
well, I don't see anybody that's 2 years or more, so that's
yeah,
great.
So it's there's either a never or there's last week. So we'll see what's going on. All right, but we're going to close that in 3, 2, 1. So we'll close that up and then share that with you all. So now you can see that great. Most of you saw that this webinar was coming up and decided to do it last week, which is awesome. So we love to seeing that. We got those guys as 6 months or last year. And then there's a group of you out there, we have 18%, that have never done it. I think one of those things maybe I left off was it might have been done, but maybe you've never done it before. You had always had someone else. Okay. So, yeah, now I'll hide that poll. And now we're back in with showing our screen here. There we go.
All right. So let's take a look at these templates. So one of the first things that we'd recommend that you set up in a template is your project origin. So first you're going to turn on that project base point and the survey points and note where those are. So I've made a note, this is the origin. You can draw a mark in there. Brian says he likes to put a big X there. I've created a couple of reference planes at that point. So by establishing the origin, now when you're bringing in other drawings, if you're always using the same origin, you can link your files in, do that origin to origin when you are linking your files, and you know that everything is lined up. It's so very important to establish that early on. Then you can also, when you go to create the views in your sheets, then you'll know that if you have that part, if you're using your origin, then they're going to show up in the viewports that you've laid out in your template.
Yeah, I find this extremely useful, especially when you start going over and adding other people's files in, AutoCAD drawings, site drawings, especially when we put this in here. Do you have that project base point defined in the project? Like Barbara said, I use a reference plane to mark that out with an X, pin those things down, and then I also use a grid line in here on the screen to establish that as my lower left-hand corner when I'm starting a building. So it's very much like AutoCAD. And then when I go to export those drawings from Revit to AutoCAD or anybody else, it makes logical sense. The out-of-the-box template has some random location where this is at, and it really caused havoc to newer users when they start off. So I'd highly recommend looking at your project base point. If you don't know what it is, one of the first things you can do is go into the site plan in the architectural template, and you'll see it in there. Or if you say reveal hidden items, you'll see that origin point in there. Now, if you like using 100 feet as your project base, as your start of your level 1, you can go in and set that up, move that up to 100 feet so you have that as an established point within your project. So there's all these different things that you can go in and do. But first and foremost, have an idea what that project base point is. Do not leave it as a random thing on the page there. And I think the only other thing was moving your views around so they kind of have it. If you're dealing with a building that's typically 60 feet by 60 feet, make your views in that area. If you're dealing with something that's 100 feet by 1,000 feet, make the views reflect that so you're not having to move those constantly around.
Yeah, so actually just come in here and grab these elevation markers and move them to where they would make more sense for in your other views. I moved them a little bit, but I haven't quite lined them up exactly with my origin in this case.
All right.
So early on, if not the first thing, then very soon when you're beginning your template, you're going to load all of your annotation objects that you typically use. So some of these are going to be loaded as far as tags and different types of objects. If you start with a base template, so if you start with one of the Revit templates, architectural, commercial, whichever one it might be, it'll load a lot of the tags and things. The other thing I want to do is actually look at your text objects, and when you start, you get like 2 choices here. And so develop your text types initially, and then everyone using the project later just has to choose the appropriate text type. And those could be used for your dimension types and for all of your other text objects and any type of annotation that you're doing, just to be consistent again.
Yeah, it's important that you establish all your tags in there based on the information that you're going to use within your model. And a lot of times as we're talking about this, I know we're approaching it, Barbara and I, as a template from a blank file, but most of the time you're going to be doing this as you're working on a project the first time through. So you'll be building all those texts in there. You'll building all those different types of fonts that you're wanting to grab and all those tags. And if you're using, if you want a working view, a working section, you have to build that particular symbol in there. So it's important that you go in and build these up. One of the other things I highly recommend is a lot of people, as you're building your own, you want to label it as your own. What you want to avoid is using your monogram or your building your firm name in the very beginning of the file to name it. So if you're ABC Architects, don't use ABC Architects door tag. Have the name at the end, okay? It's extremely important that you do that. So don't have it at the beginning, have it at the end. And I think if you don't know why, you'll find out quickly. Revit does everything alphabetically. So if you decide to name it all ABC Architects and then whatever you're going to call it, you're going to be in a world hurt later on when you go to try to find things in there. So it's utmost important that you label those things, put your name in there. That's important to do, but put it towards the end or in the middle. Do not put it at the beginning, or life will be a little hectic, to say the least.
And then you'll come back and redo your template later.
Yeah, or cry at night.
Yeah, maybe both. This is a tool. I just wanted to show you this. So this is actually an app that you can download from the Autodesk site. And it's an add-in that allows you to actually change out all of the text types. You can switch one for another. Now, if you've done this before, it's a very manual process. You have to pick out the text and then choose a new type. In this case, if you decide you wanted to switch from Arial to Romans or another font type, you can easily substitute those without having to go through the entire project and select those. You can just window around a group of text and switch out the new styles. So you may want to look into that. Just go to the Autodesk Exchange, I think is where it's at,
yeah, the
right?
Exchange apps.
And then look through the apps in there and
look for
just look for the BIM Tools. I guess the name of it is, it's kind of long here, but
Soft Sticks BIM Tools. So this was a company developed out of Germany that did it, a structural firm. They put this tool together, and really to change your fonts. So if you're let's just face it, I'm a residential architect. I like pretty fonts, and for me to go in and change all the tags, all the text, all the dimension styles, my elevations, my grids, and doing all that, that would take anywhere from about a day to 3 days to do. Typically, I was getting it done about 2 days the first time around or something like that. So it's taking a long time to change all those fonts over. And if you've never done it before, the process is you have to open up every single tag, go to the family editor, change the font, and then close it. And you really should rename it too. For each one, rename the font that you're using. So it says Arial, and it is Arial, or you're changing Times Roman, and it says Times Roman. That would take a long process. This takes those 3 days and cuts it down to about 5 minutes, to be honest. So really look for this Exchange app. It's going to save you some time. I used to not tell a lot of people about it because it was my trick up my sleeve, like, yeah, it takes us forever to do, Brian. And I'd go, oh, I'll get it done for you in like 5 minutes. And they're like, you're a magic. And you just pull this out. So you'll be magic if you could just use this and say, hey, I'll change those fonts faster than it takes you to walk across the building, and then you have it done.
You're still magic.
All right, yes, there are times.
and you don't even have to tell the boss where you got it.
Yeah, no. Tell them you've got to take 2 days off to get it done.
Yes. So now we've agreed we all need to use our CAD standards. Hopefully it's not that rough getting them hammered out in your office. So families, we're going to be adding in families into your template. So we have the standard out-of-the-box families listed here. When you load a template especially, every time you start Revit, you're going to get the same group of families. But if you've gone through and created your own families, you want to include those in your template so that you don't have to go search for them, and at the very least, you don't ever want to recreate them. So you want to add those into the template. Some things like, profiles, if you've done any kind of custom work, any custom profiles, windows, doors, any of these objects. By loading those in here, then it's just like you're starting, you've enhanced the existing templates that Revit gives you.
And one important thing, if you are going to go in and update those family files, even if they're the out-of-the-box ones, once you've updated those families, like I've taken the basic ones and updated them so that they say 3080 door and with a big 3 little o, and they're the out-of-the-box ones, but you want to save them in your own library. So once you've touched those families, even if they're the basic ones out of the box, you want to save them in your own library. So you're going to need to make your own library. And getting back to what Barbara said earlier, have a convention of where these things are going to be saved, how they're going to be saved, how you're going to name them. That's very important. So you want to have the person with the best organized sock drawer putting all this stuff together. They're the person you want to put in charge of creating these standards, right, Stan?
That's right. These guys do this. I just know it in theory, but I know it's very important, and I know that if it's done well, you can really speed up a lot of processes throughout the life cycle of a project.
And if it's not done well, it looks like my garage, and it's really hard to find things.
And apparently Rick is one of those people with a good, well-organized sock drawer.
Yep, Rick's got this good sock drawer. All right.
Awesome. Well, going along with that with the families, I kind of skipped ahead on the slide here, but also when you created your types, so you have the system families as well, you have your wall families and your floors. Once you customize those, and those go in the template, so then you don't have to come back and create another wall type. You know, build those wall types up initially, and then they'll be always available to you as you're working through the project. So next we're looking at what's called the starting view.
Oh, shucks. Thanks, Rick.
Sorry, I don't know, Rick. You guys do. Okay, so the starting view, and I mentioned this earlier, this is what comes up when you start Revit each day. You come in and you're like, okay, good, there's my starting view. I'm ready to go. And somebody maybe added notes to it. If it's a central file, you know, your starting view is going to go in that central file. When everybody checks out their locals, then they're going to see the notes. You know, there's a big meeting today, or you got a deadline, or anything like that that they may include, or, you know, somebody you need to, Rick, you need to check all those changes we made last night because you got stuff to do today. And so, good place to keep the communication going. A couple of examples of just some startup pages. So here we've all seen this one. It's the Revit sample project. They've included a lot of stuff in their startup page. You know, a lot of these different views, so you can have it just be basically your cover page. If you want to open up to the project cover sheet, then you can have a nice rendering on there to look at every day when you're starting. There's a lot of links on this particular startup page to for things to look at throughout the project. But then another example might be, you know, in the collaboration example, you know, you got your project name in here, what kind of things are important for everybody to know what's going on.
And this one I find it extremely useful, that important date, what's coming up, when's the 80% review going to be, when's the 90% review going to be, when's the RFI need to be issued, or I'm sorry, the ASI need to be issued for this particular project. Not that we do ASIs, but, you know, because we're all perfect, right? So we put that out there. Other typical starting views would be, I'd say the 3D, default 3D view in there. I still think the most important one is like what Barbara has up there, that important dates. That way your team can never complain about, well, I didn't know this was due, or I didn't know that was due. Unless they open the Revit file with their eyes closed and randomly click somewhere, they have to see the notes on here. What I see less and less is people used to put notes on how to print and how to save files and stuff on here, and I think that should go to the wayside. Put that on and staple it to their forehead or something. I don't think that belongs in the starting view, because people then start ignoring the notes on here, and you want to keep these fresh and up to date. It's just kind of, I think, our professional opinion having this. So I think this is the best one outside of cover sheets or 3D view, because even then, if I open up this view, it loads really quickly. And as opposed to a 3D view or even a cover sheet view, that might take some time to load. So this is just a bunch of notes. And I guess if you're unsure where this lies, this is always on the View tab in there where you can make a starting page. Where's the Manage tab? Could be on the Manage tab. I forget.
So creating that starting view, it is on a Manage tab.
It is, yeah, see.
So let's go. Let's see. I wanted to go to Revit here. Here we go.
There we go.
So starting view, when we go to the Manage tab, right over here then we have, I didn't turn my pointer on, but the starting view. And so that will allow you to select a starting view from whichever, the default is your last viewed, so wherever you left it yesterday, it'll come up until you changed it to have a starting view. And so you can see your entire list of views that are available to select a new one. All right, let's get back here. Okay, levels. So I mentioned earlier, out of the box Revit, you get 2 levels. So you want to start off by setting your standard levels. These are easy to change at any time. But as Brian mentioned here too, I've got 0, 0 at the top of floor. But if you want to start it at 100, or to avoid your negative number zone here, you can start at 100 foot 0. You can start at 5,000 feet. You can adjust your levels for the projects. But having those set up then keeps you from having to do that before you can go in and set wall heights and setting things to your levels. So once you've established the levels, now we'll have additional views in your project browser. So we have floor plans for all the levels that were established. Then looking at just briefly here on the project browser, another hint to use is that as you are developing your project too, how many of you know how you can organize your project browser? So you could set it up, as Brian mentioned earlier, Revit does everything in alphabetical order, which is not necessarily very helpful when you're looking at a list of drawings and you don't necessarily want them to be listed by what their alphabet, their first letter is. And so I've got them arranged here so that first by discipline, and then by the type of drawing, and by its level. So now they're going from in ascending order. I've got the basement floor and then just moving up the project so that it's easy to locate and visually you can understand where each of these views is. Okay, view templates. This is creating a view template. When you're in a view, so each view that you've established within Revit, now you have your view properties. So here I'm on a floor plan view. So what I want to look at here is actually where it says view template. So we can change that. So you could choose a new template. Oh, sorry, I didn't get that changed. But, so the templates, now again, when you start with a base template, if you start with the architectural template or maybe the structural or depending, commercial or residential, you'll have some view templates already placed in that original template. So to change those, now to apply a view template, when I've selected the button over here, they go and apply a view template, and these are all the settings that will be applied to that. So all of those that are for the type of filter here, now I've got floor plans, structural plans, and area plans, then you don't have to come back in and do this each time. And then as Brian was mentioning, you could set these up too as temporary views. So we have at the bottom of my screen here, the little button down there for temporary view properties. So this is just a temporary, just toggles on the view templates. So we can enable our view properties, and now we can go in and apply one of those views. So we say temporarily apply these view properties. I can go just in and select which of those view template types that I want to use and apply it for this particular view. And then it's not permanent. This is not your printed view, so even if you don't turn those back off, this is only a temporary setting. If you want to change them permanently, then you can set up the view template and assign that in your project, in your view properties over there.
So one I find useful is just going in and it turns off all the annotation except for like levels and grids. So if you're working on a plan and you got a bunch of dimensions and text and tags and everything else, and you just want to clean it up and just get to the model elements, I'll go in there, I have a temporary view, it turns off everything except for that, and then I'm able to just work on the project. And when I'm done, I know it won't print that way because I'm using a temporary view template. That's one of the first ones I think people go and set up within your project for the temporary view templates. And the temporary view templates and the permanent ones are the same. So whether you're assigning them or applying them or using them temporarily, they're all using the same template base. So you can go in there and set it up. So now Barbara's gone in here and she's using the temporary or going in here and assigning this, so she went over the visibility graphic overrides and kind of changed or turned off some annotation, then it's going to be working any way we want within the project file. So there on here, and if she says, oh, I don't want to deal with floors, she can turn off floors, or she can turn off generic models or lines or whatever in here, and then that's temporarily turned off in the view. So we have those.
Yeah, so I can take off the dimensions, and any of these types of items for this particular view.
Okay, and then at that point she might want to do a save as and save it as another sheet or something like that. And then when she's done, she can go back and hit the reset, and it'll go back to the way it was. Okay. But you are updating your templates, so when you're in there and you're messing with one of them, you are changing that view template. Okay, and I think one of the distinctions we need to talk about is the language that Revit uses for all these. So we're talking about, the webinar is covering project templates as a whole, and right now we're talking about view templates. Again, they're using the same word to mean a different thing, but this is just the view properties in here. So if you have some confusion, let us know or pop us a question. We might have to explain a little bit earlier, a little bit better, because I know early on people get lost on this terminology.
Yes, so the view templates are used to set things that you would normally do in your visibility graphics that you have to change per view. And so by using the template, it just saves you from having to, each time I switch views, I have to go in and open this box up and change those for the new view. I know that's always been one of my frustrations with Revit, was that everything is per view, and I have to go back and do the same thing over and over until I discovered view templates.
That's probably, I think that's another webinar we've done too on view templates. So if you want to know more, there should be another webinar out there on view templates and how to set those up and use filters and a bunch of other stuff that makes it a lot of fun. So take a look for that.
Okay, somehow I jumped ahead into my presentation.
Close your eyes until she's ready.
So, yeah, really. Don't look at this part. Okay. So those are your view templates. Now, other things you're going to include in your project template: schedules. So I mentioned this earlier. These are going to look the same for every project that you do. So why create them again? Now, this first door schedule is actually one that was placed on a sheet, so it looks a little bit different. Your views when you create the room schedule. So this is a live part of your project. When you update the rooms, then it's going to update in the schedule. And so there's no need to worry that, I might change this later. It's very easy to come through and make those changes within the schedule even. And because of Revit's parametric capabilities, you could change things in the schedule. They change in your drawing too. That way if I wanted to change all of the stairs and change one particular property for those, then it would be changed in the drawing as well, in the model. Wall schedule. So this is a very, very brief wall schedule. This may be just a working schedule that you can use while you're working on the project, and whether or not you place that on a sheet, it doesn't matter. You can have all these other views that we're going to help you to develop your project.
Barbara or Brian, if you put up a schedule with a certain configuration to it, can you change it mid-project and because often people do add columns or want to pull out some different information. Can you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, so you can always modify the schedules. That's why there's really no danger in setting it up early, because it's always able to be flexed and changed at any time in the project.
And sometimes we might even put key schedules in there. So like one that comes to mind is room finish styles. So you might have a style schedule in there, and that could be automatically in your project. You could already have that on a sheet, and it's filled out, and you're just picking, well, this has an executive finish, or this has a normal finish room, or whatever. And then when you assign those schedules to your rooms, they actually fill out the finish, the floors, the walls, all that for you, because you've done a key schedule, put that together. So those are nice things to have in addition to door schedules and stuff. It's just waiting for you to populate it with the doors, but once that's done, you're ready to go.
Then I also have on here the sheet list. So this will be used, you can create a sheet list. Then when you're ready to create sheets, you can do this one of two ways. You can create sheets initially with all of the typical sheets that you would have in a project, or if it varies a little bit from project to project, these can be just included when you go to the new sheet view. Then it'll ask you, you can choose a title block, or you can even use these as placeholder sheets. So then now you can go in and place them in the project, and you won't have to go back and purge them out later if you think that you may not need, 4 sets of enlarged plans or anything like that for a project.
This is also a good way to show all your other consultant sheets in there. In fact, it's one of the few ways to show your consultant sheets within the project. So if I need to list, as the architect, the structural, the civil drawings, the mechanical, the electrical, I would put those in as the dummy sheets within my project, and then I can put categories in and list the sheets by all the disciplines on the cover sheet. So again, it's a very nice tool to have in here. I know for myself, I'll pre-populate my sheet list for my project, and then like Barbara said, if you're not using 4 reflected ceiling plans, you're only using 2, I can remove those from the project and just hit delete, and then they're no longer in there.
So legends. Now here's another thing, rather than creating these, and it may not take a lot of time, but if you do it for every single project, then you could have saved yourself having to create that again. And if you have a certain door types that you use, if there are details that you use, we'll get to a little bit later. But legends are a great way to, those wall types that we've set up. Create a legend with all of those included in there as well.
And if you've ever had to do the legends before, you know it is a fun and wonderful task that you love to do all the time. So if you love creating legends, then maybe you don't want them in your template.
Yeah.
I find most of us roll our eyes when it comes to legends, and we'd rather not do them ever, never, ever again.
So legends, some of those things that you do repeat. I started drafting on the boards using a pencil and paper, and so every time I had to do a project and repeat the same details and repeat the same things each time, once I got into CAD, I'm like, life is much better. I don't have to do that.
We had sticky backs.
Yeah, that's true.
We could have used a sticky back.
You could get them exactly lined up on there so you don't have any bubbles showing up in here.
Line it up with your X-Acto blade, and yeah, everybody remembers how to do that, right?
Yeah, and Croy machines. Brian and I were talking earlier about that. We had to use a Croy machine to put our text on there instead of hand lettering everything.
Yeah, that was fancy.
That was really high tech.
About 3/4 of our attendees just left with that conversation.
Oh man.
Okay, well, stay out of the old days here. So here is your sheet list and placeholder sheets. So I have the sheet list. Then when I go to new sheet, these are all of the sheets that are in my sheet list that have not been placed in the project yet. That's one thing I like about Revit too, or another thing is that it doesn't allow you to repeat sheets and everything. It's okay, you already used that one, so you have to choose one of these others. Okay, setting up your sheets. So what's included in the sheets? You're going to have your title block that you noticed when you go to the new sheet button. Viewports. So if you have that origin set up, you can have your viewports already established, and then automatically your model is placed in the appropriate viewports.
And that's one thing to point out, and I like to talk about a little bit of your type of project. So if you're working on, let's say, custom residential, every project is going to be different. But if you're saying your typical project is just a retail, and that's mainly what you do, or you're doing office buildings, and they're generally about the same size, you can pre-set up all those viewports in there because the building is going to relatively be in the same spot, the same size in there, and not have to move around a lot. Or let's say you're really into a prototype and your main job, when we were talking about this today, is Burger Kings. Well, every Burger King, is relatively the same. I know the exterior is going to change, but within your template, you can build 60% of that building and have it done. We have clients right now that they do a lot of prototype building, and 80% of their building is done. Flat out, done. It's already on the sheets. It's ready to go, and they're just waiting to kind of fill it into the retail center, and most of them are big boxes, some of our big boxes they fill into retail centers or they're quick service restaurants. The building is ready to go. They have the prototype. They have the back end already done. The front end's kind of there, and it's waiting for them to finalize the styles or what region of the country they're in. You know, maybe it's in Seattle and they've got this, you know, real ultra modern look, or maybe they're in the Santa Fe and it's got this old wood and all kinds of stucco finishes. So it's pretty much 60% of the building's ready to go, and that's what their template is. You don't have to have a blank template with nothing in it. It can have, you know, most of the building already done for you.
And some of those things, you know, if you are working with some standard elements for Revit, you know, details. Maybe you do the same type of detail. You know, how many door and window details have you ever drawn in your career? Then use those. Don't recreate these things each time. Notes, you know, if you have a standard set of notes, everybody's got, you know, their little disclaimers and their standard notes for projects and the structural notes that can be very typical per project, then include those too. Just don't reinvent the wheel each time we're doing that. And then lastly, so the notes, then the graphic scale. This is something that you can also put in there. For each one, you know, Revit gives you the little view scale on each one, but if you want to have that, the bar scale, to be shown on the views, then that can also be on your sheets in there. So here's an example of some details. So these were all created. Now these are actually pretty custom details. It was the best I could find on the
Those look
today.
pretty nice. Yeah.
So, and they're AutoCAD details. Don't tell anybody.
I won't tell anybody.
But that's the other thing.
But you can do these in Revit.
You
You can do these in Revit. They can look just like this or better.
But if you already drew them in AutoCAD, all you have to do is import your AutoCAD file, and
Boo.
there's your details. Now,
Boo.
they have dumb text in them. They have no actual relation to these objects, but I'm not going to redraw them just because I want to make it all Revit. So.
And again, this is always a interesting subject, you know, around here when we do teaching, because, you know, Barbara's absolutely right. That's a quick way to get your details and so forth across, and if it serves you well, fine. But you can also you can go to some of our webinars that we've done in the past about, you know, intelligent detailing, Revit detailing, and you can learn a lot about what else you can do with a Revit detail to make your life much easier as well. But again, what serves you best?
But then again, intelligent Revit detailing is sort of is it an oxymoron, or it's maybe just a little difficult?
That's not difficult. We all took our bumwad trace paper drawings when we did it from hand, and we put them into CAD. We did that 15, 20 years ago. Now it's time to take your CAD details and put them into Revit. Just saying.
Yeah. So we'll go back and review that other webinar. Okay, now you've created your template, and using this, so each time you load a new project, it's asking you which template file to use. So right here, I want to find it in that list. There's my custom template. I'm going to bring this one in. To set that up, then you're going to go into your options. So when you're looking at Revit, you go to that big blue R up there in Revit. Getting over to Revit. There we go. So you're going to go into your options. Yeah, we're a little slow here.
It's the donut of destiny. It always fails when it comes to live demonstrations. Never fail. There we go.
Okay, so options.
Name Donut of Destiny.
I love it.
Yes. Your fate is riding on a little spinning blue line. So here we are, and we're looking at file location. So there are my templates. You've created your template. You know where you stored it because you've all agreed in your office where you're going to store that. And then you're going to just direct Revit to find it there. So you're going to add to it. We can add a new location. Here's a template I could add. One of our other projects we use for class. And then the first one you want to show up in the list here, click the one you want and move it up in the list. So that's your #1 choice there. And you can also, if you haven't come through and kind of purge this out. If there are some of these that you never use, get rid of them. So we can just take out the, the construction template if I don't do that type of, detail level of project, because the construction template has a lot of additional views in it. Or mechanical, if that's not my responsibility, I'm not going to, I could just clean this out a little bit and make it easier.
One thing I will recommend is remembering where those lie, because occasionally, if you ever have to use a piece of piping or ductwork, it's always good to pull up the MEP template, draw those items, and do whatever you need to with them. I won't tell you what the next step is. It has to do with copy and paste, but I'm not going to tell you to do that. That's a bad practice. But
no, see, I'm not actually deleting any of these, just from the project. And so we've got our path here. It's looking in the Autodesk program data files for the standard templates. So you can come back in and add those in again, should you decide that you need those. And some of the items that are in them, too, you can open a template and also just use that Transfer Project Standards again, which is also in your Manage tab. So if you haven't used this, you want to check this out, because this is a great way to reuse content from other projects. So I can copy it from another template, any of these open templates, and select what you want to bring in. Maybe you don't want all of that stuff, and you don't need cable tray settings and all of that. But you could bring in your wall types, come down here, add the text types, all this stuff that you've been creating. You can also just pull that in if you did it in another project.
now there's certain things in that list I can't pull in.
In the list?
Yeah.
Let's see, new only.
Yeah, so some things that won't be in the list will be doors, windows, columns, beams, chairs, furniture. You're not going to see any of your standalone components, lighting fixtures, stuff like that. I don't think lighting fixtures are in there. So anything that's a standalone component won't be in there. System families, like Barbara was saying, floors, walls, those will transfer over, but not any of the standalone families or component families, or however you want to list it. Those are not in the list. But things like tags and stuff like that will be in there, view templates, filters, things that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and this is also great, if you did build those wall types for another project especially, rather than going through all that again, just bring them over using your transfer project standards.
We have about 10 minutes left, so I just want to...
Yeah. One of the things I will warn you about is transferring over the materials library. You want to really pay attention to the materials library. That's going to be an area that Revit's been updating all the time. But when you're making a new template, I would almost recommend not transferring over the materials library from one to the other. Because what will happen is new assets such as the structural assets, how much materials weigh, and the environmental, or what am I trying to think, the thermal, that's the one. Thermal list, those don't transfer over if they were not created in an older version. So you really want to take a good hard look at the material browser, the materials parameters from version to version within the software out there, because each, 14 and 15 are relatively the same, but for 12 and 13 to 14, they've added more things to material library, so you want to pay attention to that and just have a bit of caution if you're transferring those over.
Yeah, especially if you're getting into using any of the energy analysis tools. They need to have those material properties in there, so you want to make sure that those are loaded with the materials that you're specifying in there. And so wrapping up here, so this is once you've added this to your options, then on your home screen, now you've got your custom template that's available when you first start Revit each time. So sort of a review here. It's just a few general tips. To talk about those office standards. If they're not established standards, you want to make sure everybody kind of agrees with what those standards are going to be. So make sure that you have a direction for what you're doing with those. And there's the file locations again that I mentioned. So it's critical to know where the files are stored, and that way if somebody comes in next week and hasn't been working on the projects, then they can find all of the information that they need.
Some of the things that, as we go forward and look to the future, I think that more and more interest is starting to be generated in the skyscraper or collaboration for Revit project. I don't think Autodesk is still clear on what they want to call it, but nonetheless, that's going to do a lot to change your look at how you template and so forth. So, if you're interested in that, please give us a call, and we'd love to talk to you about the changes that'll go on there. Let's see. Barbara, do you have anything else you want to bring up right now?
No, just finishing this up. We just have a couple notes here. I think we mentioned earlier, evaluate your template. Minimum every 2 years, so make sure that you're updating those. And then add to your template as things change so that you know that it's always up to date. Using the transfer the project standards. Make sure that you're utilizing these tools that make things a lot easier for working with projects. And then project focused. So you still want to develop your template based on how your projects are developed. Now you don't want to you're not trying to conform everybody in the office to make sure they do all the projects the same by using a template. This is just to kind of get all of the other work out of the busy work out of the way so that you can spend your time on your designs and you can develop the project without having to worry about the finished look of the sheets and how things come out. And lastly, so this last slide is sort of a review of same thing, I guess. We just kind of went through that, so the content that we're providing in here. I don't know, are we going to answer Tony's questions?
Well, we do have a couple questions here. Let's see. Jason asks, if it is a sheet, you can access the project information. That's really more of
information parameter. I think that was back when we were looking at the start sheet.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And when you're using a starting view, and as a cover sheet, Jason likes to use the cover sheet there because it has the project information parameters, the address, the name of the client, things like that on there. So when you start out that project, that's a great place to start. I like the starting view as notes, but either way is going to be great within there. So that's awesome.
Jason's the BIM manager for one of the large MEP engineering firms here in town, so he has a lot of good things to add. He's also been one of our Master Series speakers. Taylor asks, I might have missed this, but is it possible to delete view templates? We have some old view templates that we would like to remove from our template but can't seem to.
Absolutely. You can go into that manager in there, and let's see, get into Revit.
Oops, sorry.
That's awesome. What is that? So no, we can go in here, and if you go over to the Manage tab, or I'm sorry, the View tab, not the Manage tab, View Templates, Manage View Templates. We have those view templates in here, and you simply just select the one you want to remove, and you've got this little handy delete button right there. So that's one way you can go in and delete all those view templates from the view. So I'd recommend doing that with the out-of-the-box ones if you've left some and haven't changed them and haven't personalized those. So it's a great thing in there. You want to go in and remove the old ones in here. Again, the basic ones, out-of-the-box ones are there to help you start with, but I would not rely on them as the end-all, be-all. You have to use these ones. Go in, personalize it, make it your own.
So, doesn't look like there's any more questions. Brian or Barbara, do you have any in-depth comments? Otherwise, we'll close her down for the day.
Yeah, I'd just say that your template should be a living, breathing, live thing. You want to be pretty much updating those every project is kind of my thought behind that. Someone adds another great schedule in there, put it in your template if it's something you're going to use 80% of the time. My templates are heavy, meaning that I'm more of a proponent of deleting items rather than adding. So you want to go in and delete things rather than add them. That's kind of my philosophy behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And Barbara?
Yeah, I'm the same way. Everything that I can have already in the project when we're starting, then that just saves me time. Then I don't have to come back and go and add all this stuff again and again. So.
And I just want to make a quick note here. We had a guest on our webinar today from Italy, so thank you for joining us, Carmine. That's really a treat when we get somebody from somewhere else in the world besides Colorado, USA. So with that, we're going to close down for today. We thank you for joining us. We will have plenty more webinars coming up soon, and we look forward to seeing you on those as well. So with that, we'll talk to you later. Bye now.
Bye.
Okay, bye.